Yes.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Ustadh Samir. How are you doing today?
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jazakallah khairan for coming to the Humble Heart YouTube channel. So, for everyone watching this, Ustadh Samir, as far as we're concerned, when I started practicing the Deen, in my late teens, and about 17, 18 years old, Ustadh Samir used to be in our mosque, and he taught us a lot. Particularly, we went in Jamaat, taught us about Iman. He made me practice my tajweed. Ustad, you were really harsh back then, man. But jazakallah khairan in every salah that I'm doing today. MashaAllah, people like you, Sheikh Luqman, people like that were instrumental. When we used to do the tajweed lessons, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you guys immensely. So, Ustad, you've been in Islam since 1969. Okay. MashaAllah, involved in the work of da'wah for decades. You have a lot of experience. You've traveled around America. You've dealt with a lot of reverts from different ethnicities, from different demographics, different social status, etc. So I want to take the time to pick your brains today. So, once again, Jazakallah khair for coming along.
Alhamdulillah, mashallah. It's my honor to be here and to do my best, inshallah.
Inshallah. I'm looking at you, mashallah. You're as young as ever as I used to look at you when I was 18. Mashallah. So, Ustad, first question. Because not only you've experienced it, you've helped a lot of people experience it, advised. What I want to know is, let's say someone is ready to enter Islam and they want to convert to Islam. What are the challenges that they should be aware of? That they're saying, okay, these are some of the problems, some of the challenges I'm going to find once I come into the fold of Islam.
نحمده ونصلي على رسول الله الكريم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله الكريم الحمد لله. Alhamdulillah, thank you for having me here. And inshallah ta'ala, I pray that I can be as good as you think I am. Inshallah, may
Ameen,
Allah accept
inshallah.
what we have tried to do. Inshallah, you know, the challenges for the new Muslim, the new revert coming into Islam. There are some things that are general that generally should be considered, and then there are those things that need to be tailor made to that individual, that particular male or that particular female. And I think for those Muslims who are connecting with that individual, sometimes it can happen before the Shahada itself. And because sometimes a person before he or she takes Shahada, sometimes they're coming around again and again a few times. So the Muslims that are connecting with that individual may get to know that individual to some degree. And sometimes that doesn't happen. It's just somebody brand new come in, they say they want to take Shahada, and the Muslims are all happy and cheerful, and they say, okay, and they start to tell them everything so he or she can take Shahada. But whether it happens before the Shahada or after, it's important that the Muslims do kind of I mean, lack of a better term, I say an interview, but you don't want to make it seem like, you're being evasive and, right, asking all kinds of crazy questions and what about this and what about that and where you are, but it has to be because, the better you are informed, the better you know how to help this person guide. A person might be living with their girlfriend. They might be living at home with their mama. They might be living with their boyfriend. And I mean, a guy might be living with their boyfriend. Whatever the situation might be, somehow you have to kind of have an idea about some things going on so that you can help them navigate the challenge. One of the challenges is generally for most people coming into Islam, depending on how religious that individual was, even if a person was quote unquote a Christian and was very religious, they didn't get much guidance on a lot of things in their day-to-day life. They maybe avoided some bad things. They maybe went to church once a week, sometimes depending on the denomination, if they're quote unquote more religious, then they were involved in some church activities maybe 2 or 3 times a week. But it didn't encompass how they ate, how they sleep, their business, where they live, a lot of things. And so one of the challenges for new Muslims is understanding that Islam is a complete way of life. I usually try to talk to new Muslims and tell them that everything you know how to do, everything you know how to do, now you have to learn how to do it as a Muslim. However, you have to take it one step at a time. I also try to explain to them in the very beginning that there's a difference between those things that are mandatory, that you must do, that if you don't do it, that it could become a sin. And there are other things that are, mustahab, that are encouraged, that if you do it, you get reward. And if you don't do it, it's not a sin. And I try to give them some understanding of that, which most Muslims don't, because then they start pouring all kinds of stuff. You have to do it like this, and you have to do it like that, and you have to do it like that. And then a new Muslim gets sometimes very much overwhelmed. And a lot of
Mm.
times they don't ask them questions in front of the people who are telling them. They listen and they take it and they, suck it up. And then they go home and they be like, good Lord, what did I do? Where am I at? And that's the part that many Muslims who talking to them don't necessarily see. So I try to make that clear. So they need to understand, that Islam is a whole perspective, it's a whole way of life. And some of those changes are things that you need to make some changes right away or as soon as possible. And some of them, you know, can gradually come along. I think that's important to try to make that understood and even if they are involved in some things that they shouldn't do, that's haram or that's whatever, that, you know, Allah is not vengeful. And Allah knows that it's may take them some time. They have to acknowledge that that's a wrong action, that's a wrong thing, but and strive to eliminate it. They shouldn't try to take their time, but understanding that it may take time.
Ustad, now I'm looking at you and I just remembered a question that, when I was 18, 19, that you used to ask, and we used to wonder maybe Ustad has put something in his coffee and is drinking it, right?
Yeah.
So you used to ask us and you say, what made you come into Islam? We'd be like, man, my parents were Muslims. What are you talking about, right? So that was, every time somebody asked you, how did you come into Islam? You used to ask them, how did you come into Islam? And people were like, well, what are you
When did
talking
you
about?
accept Islam? Yes.
Yeah. Do you still ask that? And why has it
Oh
been
yeah.
so consistent question in your life all these years?
Alhamdulillah, thank you for asking that question. It's very much important. Those who involve themselves in doing dawah and teaching new reverts and, anything in that regards, it's been my experience and it's been my experience that they need to know first and foremost why they are Muslim. And because that course, and sometimes it's funny because when I used to be with some of you guys, and if there happened to be a father or an elder brother who was sitting near me when I would ask that question, I get a nudge and I'd be like, "What you asking that question for?" you
Yeah.
know, um, because I say, you know, it's important to understand why you are Muslim. You cannot truly be effective if you really don't know why you have accepted Islam. That's my take on the subject, and having done that as many times as I've had to many different brothers who from all different nationalities, I have gotten some amazing stories sometimes. They themselves many times have not even thought about it and didn't remember. And sometimes it has come out that they remember when I make them think, they remember that time or those issues when they were slipping and sliding about to go that way, or when they were on that path on the other side, and when they decided, no, I got to stop this shiggity. Let me get myself together. And what actually made them think that now they're going to fast, even though the parents ain't around and nobody can see it. They're going to pray even when ain't nobody else around, then they know it's time to mix a lot. And they got, when you have that understanding and know why you are Muslim, that will improve and better be able to help those who, when you are trying to give some dawah and teaching others. And
So,
so
in your
I've learned
opinion,
many things.
should a person ask that question throughout their life, multiple times, whenever they want to reinforce the lessons that the reason why they came into Islam?
Um, that I can't really answer, but I know that if they, we should always thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even if somebody has never done that and never went the wrong direction, and all their life they practiced from the time that they were, they remember until they become an old man or woman, they will always thank Allah for the guidance because we see other people.
Alhamdulillah.
It's just like we have to, no matter what our financial economic status is, we have to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the blessings that we have. We have to thank Allah. And I think the best thing that we always have to thank for is the guidance because, you know, um, Allah tells us about those who are not thankful and that if we are thankful, that he will increase us. So we should always be thankful. But whether or not a person has to revisit why they came, I think it's important that he or she knows why they came and how they decided and why they chose Islam. Because you could have left and went to something else.
Yeah.
And, just, when I ask some of that questions, a lot of times, of course, I get all the generic stuff. Okay. Everything that everybody says. Well, I know Islam is right. I know that Allah is this, what they normally hear in the masjid and what they normally hear around. I'm like, how do you know? What have you done?
Mm.
Because one of the things I teach in terms of doing dawah, when sometimes people want to give somebody the answer. It's not always right. And it's not always to the best advantage to give that person an answer. It's good to encourage and push that person, to inspire that person to want to go find out the answer. Because once they look for themselves, even when you give a nasiha to a Muslim, and sometimes you may tell him or her that, this is right and you should rather do this way or that way or whatever. Sometimes, giving them that information, but also encouraging them to go check it out. Because once they go and look and find for themselves what you told them, and now it dispels what they thought was correct, that is more powerful than you just telling them and
Mm.
them accepting what you said.
So it's a path, it's a journey that everyone needs to take, is what you're saying, and discover it on their own.
Yes.
Okay. Jazakallah khairan. So now we have a revert and they've reverted to Islam. How important is it for it to announce to everybody that they're now coming to Islam, and how should they do that? And that explain that from a man and a woman's point of view.
Again, um, it depends on their dynamics, on their individual dynamics. We shouldn't push somebody to do that, nor should we hinder somebody from doing that. We have to help their journey. And the more we know about their journey, the more we can help. Um, but those individuals, sometimes individuals have a close relationship with their family. Unfortunately, in America, um, families are not always as close as many of our Muslim, cohorts from various parts of the world. Many of them have very close family ties with their paternal, parents, their mother and father and siblings, and extended family, grandparents, cousins, uncles, aunt. It's not always like that in America. It should be. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes people have a close relationship with their family. Sometimes they may still be living with their family at whatever particular age that individual is. A lot of those dynamics are there. But when they need to, it also depends on that person's journey to Islam. If they have been, you know, um, checking out some things about Islam along the way, then perhaps they have been dropping some breadcrumbs. They've been given some hints or having some different things with their family along the way to let them know that they might be going in this direction. And, sometimes they haven't. Sometimes they haven't had any information. But in the case scenario where they don't live with their parents and they are not haven't been, telling them about this journey, or maybe it just happens. Sometimes people, they be thinking about it, but then they meet a Muslim and and everything clicks, and right away they just take Shahada. Um, it also depends on how much they're going to be in that person's life, because now the changes are going to come. If they are in that living in the same house, or in the company of their non-Muslim family um, a lot, then it might be a good idea to let them know that they've made this change. And sit them down and let them know. Sometimes they come from very strong religious families, and the people are going to uh, give them, they come from a very strong, and it's going to really be shocking, because this person might be very deep in their Christianity, and now all of a sudden they flip the script and it was Muslim. They need to, let them know, I thank you. I love you. You raised me. You taught me about God. You took me to church or whatever and taught me this thing, and that has always been very strong in me. I've loved that. I love my connection, but I always wanted to know, have some certainty about the way that I worship the Creator. And so I've been making my own research, I've been doing my own investigation, and I've come to this conclusion and this study. And this is why they should not try to convince their family. They shouldn't get into arguments with their family. If their family agrees or disagrees, they are an adult usually. I mean, I've had times where people accepted Islam and they were still a young teenager, and I've had to help talk to their parents and so forth. But especially usually a person is usually a young adult, beyond 18, male and female. So they should know that they have that right and they have that responsibility, because everybody has to stand in front of God by him or herself on the day of judgment. And if the parents disagree, this is what they have to be able to, to be able to tell them and to stand on.
So my next question, I want you to answer this briefly, because we're going to break it down to the next series of questions. So someone is they've come into Islam. Name me top 3 areas that they should then concentrate their learning on. Just areas, and then we'll get into the depth of everything else.
Okay, good. First is belief. Belief, it has to get clarity about what it means to truly believe in Allah and what Allah is, because the understanding of that to some degree in some critical points in terms of whatever faith they might have come from or what they think they know about God, that has to be clearly understood. And then basic forms of worship. They have to know how to begin to incorporate the prayer and worship in their life, and um and basic general um character. They should know the basic do's and don'ts. And I'm not going to know everything as far as what's halal and haram, but the basics. I actually, which we can maybe talk about later, and yeah, bring the list because I haven't brought it all, but I have the 10 degrees of focus that just as we have the 6 articles of faith and the 5 pillars of Islam, I have 10 articles of focus for the new Muslim. They're learning what they should be focusing their learning on, because stuff is going to come from all different directions, and then they're going to go to a bookstore and they're going to see all kinds of books about this and that, and all kinds of videos and stuff. They come online and learn all kinds of things, but they should focus in these main areas to begin their learning process to help them assimilate in Islam.
Okay. My
So first
next question,
belief, the next is about the worship and the character.
my next question is going to be a little bit controversial, and this applies to both reverts and born Muslims or whatever. Somebody reverts to Islam, or somebody, a born Muslim decides that they're going to have to learn about Islam. So today, when you look at YouTube or you look at different articles and stuff like that, there are all kinds of materials available. Somebody's telling you do things this way, somebody's telling you do things this way. It's very overwhelming, right?
It's crazy.
Help me navigate this. I mean, somebody, who's just coming into Islam, maybe they don't have access to, it's best to actually have a buddy or somebody they can refer to, ask questions, maybe an imam. But you know, in America, there's a lot of communities which are remote. There's may not be a mosque, there may not be an imam, the local people may not know. How does a person, whether it's a revert or a Muslim, navigate this YouTube minefield?
Very carefully, my friend. Very carefully, Grasshopper.
Okay.
This is a very challenging situation and dynamics that we live in today. And young people who know their whole life, that they, I mean, you probably been around others who are 2 and 3 years old, know how to, turn the phone on, go to this or that and the other, and can't even, spell their name yet verbally, but they know how to navigate some different things. So, it's a very challenging thing, and there's a lot. And first, an individual has to be told, there has to be some guidance as to what, unfortunately, is not many really good places for reverts to go. There's a lot of places, and if that revert isn't guided to some place where they should take their information from online as well as locally, um, they're gonna find some their own. And when they find their own, it could it could be whatever. And then you have the challenge of now trying to correct them. They went to a channel and they heard Sheikh so and so, who looks like some big super Muslim sheikh, and everybody calls him that, and he says this, 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 and that person now learned that and believes that because he got it from Sheikh so and so on
Super
on
Sheikh.
YouTube so and so, and now you have to kind of convince though you and I know big sheikhs, now, but we know that guy is talking some yin yang out the side of his neck.
Yeah.
And now we have to try to be able to convince this person that we know something better than that person, which is a challenge, very much challenge. And so we need some places, but whatever we know, we have to share. If we know some, even though we know that the best learning is face to face, heart to heart, but that's not always going to happen. So we need to be able to We need to be able to tell them where they can go in between our sessions so that we can help them navigate some of that, inshallah, which is
So
not
are you
easy.
so are you recommending whether it's a revert or a born Muslim, or they should have some kind of a real life brother or a mentor or someone they can go to filter this information? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's absolutely essential. I mean, you try to connect. If you're in a masjid where somebody's taking shahada, you got to try to connect. People don't usually connect, and everybody gets happy and cheerful. Maybe somebody brought that person to the masjid. Maybe, that person wandered into the masjid, but somebody needs to connect with that individual to help guide him or her. Even nobody else there. If it's a sister, then and no sisters are there, you got to find a way to properly connect without seeming, playboyish, so that you can connect that sister to a sister that's going to help her, on the right path. Because if the shaitan devours the lone wolf. We know that. So if they don't have, and they need to get friends and connections. And even that revert that's there, if you're in a city, in a community where there's mostly, you know, Muslims from any particular ethnic background who were born and raised in Islam, no matter how good you are, and that individual, the imam or whoever else in that masjid is helping that revert person, no matter how good, experienced, knowledgeable that individual is, you need to find somebody who is also a revert to connect with that person. If that person doesn't live in your community, then you got to reach out somewhere else, but you have to connect. When people came from different tribes and accepted Islam, the Prophet ﷺ, if there was somebody who was Muslim who was from that tribe, he connected them with that person because there's some sahba, there's some connection, there's some things that has to happen. And so I see it sometimes in some communities where brother so and so who's from country XYZ is, the one who's teaching all of the reverts, and he never connects them with any other reverts. And that's going to, and then he wondering why he's got them for some time, and then now they disappear and they don't come back and there's no connection, and he's calling them and they don't answer because he didn't make that connection. He has to connect them with some people from their ethnicity, from that have some of their same experience. Sometimes the person thinks he's talking perfect English, but he got an accent that is so difficult for the revert to properly understand that, the revert never said anything. The revert understands it, but it's still kind of like scratching the chalkboard for that
Funny.
revert listening to this guy and his accent,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
sometimes those simple little things are what Shaitan uses to take them away.
Jazakallah. Now, talk to me. I've heard a lot of these posters and emails that you send out about your Dawah 365, brother. So talk to me about that. What is this Dawah 365 you got?
I have to physically put it in writing in all the nuances, and I hope over this next coming year that I get it done, because Dawah 365, first of all, Dawah is an acronym because I like acronyms. Dawah is an acronym that I, not AI, came up with, which stands for delivering advice with attention for the hereafter. Because now those people who want to do dawah, whether they focusing on Muslims or non-Muslims, are caught in an event. They have a certain day, a certain time, a certain way, many times a certain place where they do dawah. And outside of that, they don't do no dawah. Muslims of the past, everybody understood it was his or her responsibility to invite the people towards Islam. When Genghis Khan and his people conquered the Muslims
Hey,
and
that's my
subjugated,
grandfather.
Alhamdulillah. But they accepted Islam eventually, But when they conquered the Muslims and the Muslims got subjugated, still, it's the only time in history, as far as I know, and I ain't a history buff, but the only time in history where the conquerors accepted the religion of the conquered.
Conquered. Yeah.
You see, because everybody, though he might have been the servant cleaning the emperor's house and mopping and scrubbing the floors, but they gave dawah and told the people not only their behavior, not only their good Islamic character, but they also let them know that they had Islam and Islam was better. Now we think only the Imam, only a certain people, only at a certain time, only at a certain place is supposed to do dawah. But dawah should be 365. I learned that my way wasn't called like that. That's my acronym, that's my marker. But we learned to be a da'i. In Tabligh, we learned that we are to be a da'i wherever we go. If I'm around Muslims, then my actions and my words should be inviting to Allah. If I'm around non-Muslims, then my actions and my words should be inviting to Allah. Doesn't mean that you have to be talking, oh, be Muslim, be Muslim. Oh, you read the Quran. No, you might be talking about your favorite sports team. You might be talking about what else. But you learn how to give that person some spark, some understanding, a way to do dawah, a way to come to Islam, invitation, that's your responsibility.
Let,
And
let,
when you
let me
do
just
that,
interrupt you for a second, right? I mean, a question would come for somebody who's a born Muslim, right? They say, from the beginning, they say, brother,
raised Muslim, because everybody's born Muslim.
yeah, okay, raised Muslim. And they say, brother, I don't know anything, man. I just do my salah and that's about it, right? So how am I supposed to do dawah? I don't know anything. So answer that.
Hello, anni walau ayah. Kama qala Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi
Sallallahu
wasallam.
alayhi wasallam.
Hey, be your best. Invite somebody and give them something to read. Hey, you know anything about Islam? You know about Allah? You know I'm Muslim. Blah, blah, blah. You know, one of the stories, I can't remember. I have to find it maybe. One of the stories I heard about one guy, how he became Muslim. He was one revert. He was telling about, he knew one Arab guy, and somehow they would have conversation. They talk about religion, and the non-Muslim would ask him some questions, and the Arab guy would just listen and talk to him. And the next day or the next time they met, the Arab guy would give him a pamphlet, a brochure, something about whatever it was that he was just asking about or talking about. A lot of times it was a lot of Ahmed Didat stuff. But hey, you don't know. No, I know that there's only one God. La ilaha illallah. I believe that and know why you believe that. Okay, you don't know. Okay. There's too many pamphlets, there's too many videos, there's too many everything. Give. You don't have to know. But the Prophet ﷺ say, tell what you know. The only thing is, the problem is when people try to answer questions outside of their knowledge.
How about
The person
can
asks
that?
the questions and now they try to act like they know everything and then they say some dumb stuff. No, just take them to somebody, connect them to somebody, give them something to read, give them a website, give them an email, give them a video. Do the effort. Do what you can do within what you got.
So what if I'm too shy to do anything like that, and I just take a brother, to buy him a coffee and a donut? That's my thing. So okay, may Allah change his heart. That's all I can do. Whatever. Is that dawah? I'm doing
Delivering,
something good to them.
listen, delivering advice with attention for the hereafter. You do it with the niyyah that this person comes closer to Islam. Inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inna amal bi Inshallah, Allah will give you a niyyah. If you can do more, give them something. If you can't, you do what you do. Make dua, take them for coffee and donut, make dua, Allah open their hearts to Islam. Do what you can do.
Okay. Jazakallah. Let's take a 5-minute break. We'll rejoin inshallah. Okay.
Inshallah.
Jazakallah khair.